What's going on, guys? Back at it with the manual swap, and today we are going to be pulling the transmission out of the car. So this is going to be a little bit fun, I won't lie. So we got the transmission tilted down off the cross member, and we're just about ready to start cracking these transmission bolts. I want to give you guys a notice real quick for you OBD1 guys who are doing this conversion. Your starter bolts are going to be a little bit more fun. Us OBD2 guys, our starter bolts thread right into the starter, but the OBD1, you guys 95 and below, basically have nuts on the back of the starter that you need to hold in place while you undo those transmission bolts, which might require you to remove your intake manifold. I will leave a link in the description of this video on how to do that so that you guys can get those starter bolts off. The rest of us, for these OBD2 guys, we're going to go a little bit over the tools you need to use for pulling these transmissions and sort of the strategy that we're going to go. Tools we will be using: 3/8 driver, 10mm socket. There's a little bolt on the back of the transmission, that's the 10 that needs to come off. E14 torque socket. I have a deep well and a short well there. I sort of use a combination of both to get some of the bigger ones off. E12 torque spit and an E10 torque spit. So all of the transmission bell housing bolts are star pointed bolts. 3/8 extension, a stupid long 3/8 extension, and another stupid long extension. So we'll go sort of over how we're going to approach attacking the top transmission bell housing bolts, but you do need some long extensions like that to get to them. I used a pry bar mainly to keep the torque converter inside the transmission, so I was sort of prying the torque converter into the transmission off the block as we started pulling off the transmission. So the pry bar definitely helped out there. I used a magnet to sort of fish out some of the upper transmission bolts when I got them off. A 19mm socket and an impact to match. So the flywheel bolts for the automatic transmission are 19mm. I did use an impact to zip them off. You can do them by hand, but it's going to take a little bit more effort than an impact will. And if you're going to do it by hand, you need to hold the crankshaft in place using a 22mm either wrench or socket to hold the crank in place while you bust those guys loose. Alright, aside from the standard tools, I am going to have a couple friends help me remove the transmission. The job will go a lot easier if you have some homies to help. Alright, so aside from a little 10mm nut that we do need to take off, these are the main guys we're going to be using. These are E10, E12, and E14 sockets. So these are star pointed bolts, and the transmission bell housing bolts are star pointed bolts. Like I've said in some of my other videos, including the head removal video and the starter replacement video, you need to use star pointed bolts. So this is the equivalent of what an E12 would be, except it's not a star pointed, it's a 12 point. Now, you can try and use that. I would highly advise against it. The first manual conversion I did using these sockets, and I sort of bit the bullet on one, and I did end up stripping one of the bolts. I actually had to grind bolt head off to get that bolt out, and that would absolutely suck. Luckily, I did it on one of the lower transmission bolts, so I was able to get a grinder in there, but if you strip one of the top ones, you are royally screwed. So go out, do yourself a favor, get a legit set of star point sockets to pull this off. They are on tight as hell. Just a disclaimer, if you use a general socket like this, I can do nothing for you if you strip one of those bolts. So we're going to go over taking the automatic transmission off. So this transmission is just going to be used for demonstration. This is actually a Getrag manual transmission, not an automatic transmission. So in reality, the automatic transmission is a good bit bigger and a good bit longer. The principle is basically going to be the same. Alright, so basically here's where all the transmission bolts go. I will leave a link to a diagram in the description for you guys, so you guys will know exactly where all of the bolt holes are. Because the chassis of the car is hugging it really closely, we're not going to be able to put our socket on our wrench and get after these. What we're going to have to do is get two long extensions like these and get it on our wrench like that. And from there, we're going to have to go up and get at these transmission bolts. I know this seems like overkill because this is way out here, but the automatic transmission is literally that much longer than the manual one, so you do need to stack extensions like this. Alright, so we are right where we took those torque converter bolts off, right by the exhaust manifold. Now there's actually a little 10mm bolt right here that we need to take off before we can start cracking all of the transmission bolts loose. Again, that guy is a baby little 10mm. Very nice. Alright, so there are a handful of transmission bolts on the bottom here that we can get to without getting that massive extension out. So I'm going to go ahead and get as many of these little guys out as I can, and then we'll start working on the ones on the top. And these guys are on pretty tight, so they might give up a fight. The bigger guys are definitely going to be on a lot tighter, so just look out for that. Alright. Alright, so that transmission bell housing bolt up at the top, I was actually able to get that without using the extension, just by using a short well socket to reach up there with it. Alright, so just by on the bottom undoing the transmission bolts, I got it to where I only have 3 left. So the one right there, the one in the middle, and the one on the right are the only ones that I need to take off by using the extremely long extension. The rest of them I got off by hand, just by reaching around the transmission. So we're going to use that really 2 long extensions to get after those guys. And once those are off, that will be it. Alright, I got my 2 long extensions here, and I'm going to try and hook one onto one of these starter bolts. So if you have an OBD1 E36, at this point taking the starter bolts off is where you would need to grab the nut on the back of the starter. So if you have an OBD1 E36, I'm sorry, because you got to pull your intake manifold off. So I have a magnet here. I'm going to see if I can fish out the actual starter bolt. There's one of them. And then we have one E14 left. Oh! Alright, so we got the last transmission bolt hooked. Oh! Alright, so now we're going to actually be pulling the transmission off. So I'm going to have a friend at the back actually pulling on it. I'm going to be pushing on it. And then we're going to have another one to guide, sort of help guide the transmission off. If worse comes to worse, I do have a pry bar here to help influence the transmission getting off, so keep it on the jack. The transmission is very heavy. I have not drained the fluid, so it's going to be a little bit heavier. We want to be as careful and as smooth as we can. It still might come crashing down, but it's going to be fun, no doubt.
You want me?
So I want you on this side of the jack, and you're going to be sort of pulling on the flex disc. I'm going to be back here kind of pushing, and then Alex, I kind of want you manning the jack. So I'm going to try my best to keep the torque converter inside the transmission as we're getting it off. Otherwise fluid's going to come pouring out and get everywhere. Okay, so you want to start, I would get a little bit farther back than that, Arthur. You're going to want to be pulling on the actual back of the transmission to get it off. Whoa. Yep. Okay.
Disengage. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Alright. Actually, Alex, jack it up. Oh yeah, that's fucking money shot, boys. Alright, Alex, lower it down slowly.
Ding 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 ding.
Chicken fucking dinner!
Ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner!
Oh! Alright, so the last thing we have to take off is this automatic flywheel. Now, this guy has a handful of bolts, 8 of them, and they're all 19mm. Now, if you're going to crank these off by hand, have someone hold the crankshaft at the front of the motor. Otherwise, this thing is just going to spin. But I have an impact here, so we're just going to zip them off. Guy has a spacer, and the actual flywheel has a dowel pin. Come on. Come to Papa, there we go. Alright. And then since I'm going to be replacing the starter, I'm going to be taking this little metal bracket off of here. It's got a little dowel pin. One right here. And one right there. Alright, so the transmission is out. I did use a little bit of pry bar action to try and keep the torque converter in the transmission. That didn't really work out as well as I hoped it would. Our automatic transmission, flywheel, and torque converter is out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I will see you guys later.